The air on Nexus 6 tasted of ozone and decay, a scent that clung to the back of Matt Riley's throat like metallic dust. He adjusted the seal on his environment suit. The hiss of recycled air, a familiar counterpoint to the alien thrumming that permeated the dense, violet jungle outside the perimeter fence. Bioluminescent fungi cast shifting patterns of emerald and sapphire across the moss-draped trunks of trees that twisted towards the twin suns, their leaves like panes of stained glass filtering the strange light. Matt, a xenobiologist contracted by the omnipresent Turtleranova Corporation, scanned the sensor readings on his wrist unit again. Ambient life signs were nominal. Atmospheric particulates stable. Seismic activity negligible. Yet, an unease prickled beneath his skin. A low hum of anxiety that had nothing to do with the standard dangers of an uncharted world. It was the silence that unnerved him, the unnatural stillness that had fallen over the sector in the last rotation. The chittering insects had gone quiet. The arboreal grazers hadn't been sighted. Even the wind seemed hesitant, whispering through the colossal flora with a strained sigh. Inside the prefabricated hab dome, the atmosphere was thick with a different kind of tension. Director Thorne paced, his face pale under the sterile lighting, his usual corporate bluster replaced by a brittle fear. Status report. Riley. Anything. Thorne's voice was sharp, cutting through the low murmur of the comms chatter. Matt shook his head, tapping the display. Same as the last scan. Director. Minimal biosignatures within 5 clicks. It's quiet. Too quiet. Too quiet. He zoomed in on a thermal anomaly near the northern ridge, a faint heat bloom that pulsed erratically. Could be geothermal, or it could be something else. Thorne swore under his breath, running a hand through his thinning hair. Something else. Always something else on this godforsaken rock. Turtleranova promised a garden world, rich in unobtainium, ripe for the picking. They didn't mention the nightmares. He gestured vaguely towards the reinforced viewport, towards the twilight jungle, where shadows seemed to coalesce and writhe. The corporation's mandate was clear: assess planetary biology, identify potential threats, catalog resources, and pave the way for strip mining operations that would bleed Nexus 6 dry within a standard decade. Standard procedure, but Nexus 6 felt different, older, warrior. The first alarm shrieked through the dome moments later, a piercing electronic scream that vibrated in Matt's teeth. Red emergency lights strobed, plunging the command center into a hellish, flickering twilight. Perimeter breach, Sector Gamma. A frantic voice crackled over the comms. Multiple contacts. Fast movers. Oh God, they're through the fence. Static erupted, followed by a wet, tearing sound and a final, choked gasp. Thorne slammed his fist on the console. Security teams. Respond. Code red, Ethel Force authorized. But the response was fragmented. Chaotic. Gunfire echoed distantly. Sharp staccato bursts swallowed by the immense jungle. Then, silence again, heavier than before. Matt grabbed his pulse rifle from the rack, the cool metal a small comfort against the rising panic. He exchanged a look with Ariana Sharma, the lead geologist, her dark eyes wide with fear but her hands steady as she secured her own sidearm. "What are they?" she whispered, her voice barely audible above the klaxons. Matt shook his head. "Nothing we've cataloged. Nothing that should move that fast or hit that hard." The seismic sensors spiked wildly. Something heavy was moving towards the dome, shaking the very ground beneath their feet. The main viewport imploded inwards, showering the command center with razor-sharp plasteel shards. Through the gaping hole surged creatures of nightmare, things that defied terrestrial biology. They were vaguely reptilian, scaled in obsidian black, moving with a terrifying, fluid grace on multiple limbs tipped with scythe-like claws. Rows of needle-sharp teeth filled mouths that gaped impossibly wide, and their eyes, multifaceted and burning with cold, red light, scanned the room with predatory intelligence. They were hunters, apex predators evolved in a crucible of alien lethality, and the habdome was merely a flimsy container of soft, slow prey. The remaining security personnel opened fire, streams of plasma scoring the creature's hides, but failing to stop their relentless advance. One guard screamed as claws tore through his armor, lifting him bodily before vanishing back into the swirling chaos. Thorn fumbled for his pistol, his face a mask of disbelief. Impossible. Our defenses. He didn't finish the sentence. A sinuous black form dropped from the ceiling vents, landing silently behind him. A wet crunch echoed, and the director collapsed, his corporate authority rendered meaningless in an instant. Matt fired his pulse rifle, the bolt striking one of the creature's flank, staggering it momentarily. Ariana, move. Now. He grabbed her arm, pulling her towards the emergency access tunnel that led to the subterranean geological lab. Plasma fire crisscrossed the room, the stench of burnt flesh and alien ichor filling the air. They scrambled through the hatch just as the blast door began to hiss shut. Matt risked a final glance back. The command center was a charnel house, the lights flickering over scenes of unimaginable carnage. The creatures swarmed over the consoles, tearing at equipment and bodies with equal ferocity, their red eyes burning with implacable hunger. The door sealed with a heavy thud, plunging them into the relative darkness of the tunnel. The sounds of slaughter muffled but still terrifyingly present. They ran, footsteps echoing on the metal grating, the emergency lighting casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to writhe with unseen threats. What were those things? Ariana gasped, breathless. They weren't in any of the survey data. Matt kept running, pulling her along. Turturanova's surveys were incomplete, focused on resources, not risks. We weren't the first intelligent life here, Ariana. We were just the latest invaders. The tunnel branched ahead. One way led to the main geolab, likely already compromised. The other led to an old emergency egress point, supposedly sealed but connecting to a network of natural caverns mapped by early probes. This way, Matt urged, veering left. It's our only chance. They navigated the winding tunnels by the thin beams of their helmet lamps, the silence pressing in on them, broken only by their ragged breathing in the distant, unsettling echoes from the overrun base. The air grew cooler, damper, carrying the scent of minerals and something else, something musky and primal. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a heavy bulkhead door, its surface scarred and dented. The control panel was dark. No power. Ariana stated the obvious, her voice trembling slightly. Matt examined the locking mechanism. Manual override. Might take a minute. He braced his rifle and began working on the release bolts, his fingers surprisingly nimble despite the adrenaline coursing through him. The silence stretched, amplifying every scrape of metal, every drip of water from the cavern ceiling high above. Then a sound, a faint scraping dot coming from the tunnel behind them. Matt froze, listening intently. It was getting closer. They found the tunnel, he whispered, working faster. The scraping intensified, punctuated by a low, guttural clicking. Ariana drew her sidearm, aiming it back down the corridor, her knuckles white. Matt. The final bolt gave way with a groan. Matt heaved the heavy door open just enough for them to slip through, revealing a vast, natural cavern beyond, glittering with crystalline formations. Go! Go! Ariana scrambled through, Matt following, pulling the door shut behind them. He jammed a discarded metal strut into the mechanism, hoping it would slow their pursuers. They found themselves in a breathtaking subterranean world, giant crystals, pulsing with soft internal light, illuminated a space easily large enough to house the entire research base. Waterfalls cascaded down walls embedded with luminous ores, feeding a clear, still lake in the cavern's center. Strange. Phosphorescent plants grew in clusters, casting intricate shadows. It was beautiful, serene, and utterly alien. But the scraping sound returned, now coming from the other side of the bulkhead door. Heavy impacts vibrated through the metal. The strut wouldn't hold for long. "We need to hide," Ariana said, scanning the immense space. "Somewhere they won't find us." Matt pointed towards a narrow fissure partly concealed by a curtain of glowing moss near the far wall. "There. It looks deep." They moved quickly, their boots crunching on the crystalline floor. The beauty of the cavern lost on them, as the sounds of splintering metal echoed from the entrance. They squeezed through the fissure into a tight, descending passage, the air growing warmer, the musky scent intensifying. Behind them, the bulkhead door burst open with a deafening crash, and the clicking, chittering sounds of the obsidian predators spilled into the great cavern. The passage twisted downwards, opening into a smaller chamber, this one dimly lit by glowing mineral veins in the rock. Relief washed over Matt, quickly replaced by a new, immediate terror. They were not alone. Standing near the center of the chamber, partially obscured by steam rising from geothermal vents, was a figure. Tall, slender, and undeniably sentient. Its skin was the color of twilight, a deep, mesmerizing blue, marked with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and flow like living ink. It wore minimal covering, seemingly fashioned from cured hides and woven fibers, accentuating a lean, powerful musculature. Long, dark hair, braided with what looked like small bones and feathers, cascaded down its back. But it was the eyes that held Matt captive, large, almond-shaped, and glowing with a faint, golden luminescence. They fixed on him and Ariana with an unnerving intensity, devoid of any recognizable emotion, yet radiating a palpable sense of ancient power and lethal grace. In one hand, the figure held a long, wickedly sharp spear tipped with polished obsidian. The other hand rested lightly on its hip, fingers brushing against a series of darts strapped to its thigh. Before Matt or Ariana could react, a high-pitched chittering echoed from the passage they had just exited. One of the obsidian predators squeezed through the fissure, its red eyes locking onto the humans. It lowered its head, emitting a low growl, saliva dripping from its fanged maw. Matt raised his rifle, but before he could fire, the blue-skinned figure moved. It wasn't a run or a leap, but a flow, an impossible blurring of motion that seemed to defy physics. One moment it was standing still, the next it was beside the predator, the obsidian spear driving upwards with incredible force, punching through the creature's armored throat. The beast gave a strangled cry, collapsing in a heap, dark ichor pooling around it. The blue figure withdrew the spear with a flick of the wrist, the movement economical and deadly. It turned its golden eyes back to Matt and Ariana, who stood frozen, weapons forgotten. The figure tilted its head slightly, regarding them with that same unnerving, intelligent calm. Then Didit spoke, its voice a low, resonant hum, surprisingly melodic yet carrying an edge of danger. The words were incomprehensible, alien clicks and tones woven into a complex linguistic tapestry. Ariana instinctively raised her hands in a universal gesture of peace. "We mean you no harm. We were attacked. Those things. They destroyed our base." The figure's expression didn't change. its golden eyes shifting between them. It took a step closer, its movements fluid and silent. Matt felt a primal urge to back away, but stood his ground, keeping his rifle lowered but ready. The figure stopped a few feet away, its gaze lingering on Matt. It raised a hand, long blue fingers extending slowly towards him. Matt tensed. Was this a threat, a greeting, an assessment? The air crackled with tension. Then, the figure's attention shifted abruptly. More chittering sounds echoed from the passage. Two more predators were forcing their way through the fissure. The blue huntress, for Matt instinctively knew that was what she was, reacted instantly. She spun, grabbing one of the darts from her thigh. With a flick of her wrist, she sent it flying. The dart struck the lead predator squarely in the chest. The creature stumbled, shuddered, and then froze mid-stride, becoming utterly immobile, a statue of black chitin and teeth. Its red eyes remained open, fixed, but devoid of life or movement. Paralysis, complete and instantaneous. The second predator hesitated, sensing the sudden fate of its packmate. The huntress flowed forward again, spear flashing. This time, the strike was aimed at the creature's multifaceted eyes. It shrieked, recoiling, but the huntress was relentless, dodging a swipe of its claws and driving the spear deep into its flank. The beast thrashed, then fell silent, succumbing to the expertly placed blow. Silence descended once more, broken only by the hiss of steam and the drip of water. The blue huntress stood amidst the carnage, breathing evenly, her spear dripping ichor. She turned back to Matt and Ariana, her expression unreadable. She gestured towards the paralyzed creature, then towards the passage, a clear warning. More would come. She then pointed towards a deeper section of the cave system, obscured by shadows, an invitation, a command. Matt looked at Ariana, whose face mirrored his own uncertainty and fear, but also a dawning realization. This being, this lethal, enigmatic huntress, had just saved their lives. Twice. They were hopelessly lost, hunted, on an alien world whose dangers they had barely begun to comprehend. Following her might be their only path to survival. Matt lowered his rifle completely, letting it hang by its strap. He nodded slowly towards the deeper cave passage. "Okay," he said, his voice hoarse. "We'll follow you." He wasn't sure if she understood the words, but the intent seemed clear. The huntress watched him for a moment longer, her golden eyes seeming to probe his very thoughts. Then, with a subtle inclination of her head, she turned and melted into the shadows, beckoning them to follow. Matt and Ariana exchanged a look, a silent agreement passing between them. They took a deep breath and stepped forward, leaving the dead predators and the remnants of their old lives behind, plunging deeper into the unknown heart of Nexus 6, guided by a silent, blue-skinned killer. The air grew warmer, thicker, carrying the scent of strange spices and damp earth. The passage narrowed, forcing them to walk single file, the huntress leading the way with an unnerving certainty, her bare feet making no sound on the rock. The only light came from Matt and Ariana's helmet lamps and the occasional patches of glowing moss, painting the scene in shifting hues of green and blue. After what seemed like hours of navigating the labyrinthine tunnels, the passage opened into another large cavern. This one felt different. It was clearly inhabited. Hooven mats covered parts of the floor. Strange tools carved from bone and obsidian lay neatly arranged on rock shelves, and a low fire pit glowed in the center, emitting a fragrant smoke. Animal hides, cured and stretched, hung like tapestries on the walls, depicting complex scenes of hunts and celestial events unknown to human eyes. It was a home, primitive yet sophisticated, radiating an aura of ancient traditions. The huntress stopped near the fire pit, turning to face them. She gestured for them to sit on one of the woven mats, her movements graceful and deliberate. Hesitantly, Matt and Ariana complied, removing their helmets. The cave air surprisingly breathable, though thick with unfamiliar scents. The huntress studied them again, her golden eyes lingering on Matt's exposed face, then on the Turtleranova insignia on his suit. A flicker of something unreadable crossed her features. She picked up a hollowed-out gourd from near the fire, dipped it into a stone basin filled with clear water, and offered it to Ariana first. Ariana hesitated, then accepted it with a grateful nod, sipping cautiously. The water was cool and pure. The huntress then offered the gourd to Matt. He took it, his fingers brushing against hers. A faint, unexpected warmth radiated from her blue skin, a surprising contrast to her lethal efficiency. He drank, the simple act feeling like a truce, a fragile bridge between two vastly different species. The huntress sat opposite them, tucking her legs beneath her, her spear resting within easy reach. She watched them, her silence as profound as the depths of the cave. Matt knew they needed to communicate, to understand their situation. But the language barrier felt insurmountable. He pointed to himself. Matt Riley. He then pointed to Ariana Sharma. He gestured around the cave. Thank you for saving us. The huntress tilted her head, listening to the sounds, her expression unchanging. She then pointed a slender blue finger at herself. Xandria, she said, her voice the same low, resonant hum. The name echoed strangely in the cavern, tasting of starlight and shadows. Xandria then reached out again, her fingers gesturing towards Matt's arm, specifically towards a small cut he'd sustained during the escape, barely noticeable beneath the grime and torn fabric of his suit. A bead of red blood welled on the surface. Matt instinctively tensed, unsure of her intention. Xandria's golden eyes fixed on the drop of blood, a sudden, intense curiosity lighting her gaze. She made a soft clicking sound deep in her throat, a sound that might have been intrigue or perhaps hunger. Slowly, carefully, she extended a single finger towards the wound. Matt held his breath, unsure whether to pull back or allow the contact. Ariana watched, equally tense. Xandria's fingertip, cool and smooth, gently touched the bead of blood. She drew her finger back, observing the crimson smear against her blue skin. Then, she did something utterly unexpected. She raised her finger to her lips and tasted the blood. Her reaction was instantaneous and profound. Her golden eyes widened, the pupils dilating rapidly. A soft gasp escaped her lips, and a shudder ran through her slender frame. She stared at Matt, not with hostility or hunger, but with shock, wonder, and something akin to recognition. The intense, predatory aura she carried seemed to soften, replaced by a dawning fascination. She touched her finger to his blood again, then tasted it once more, her eyes closing briefly, as if savoring a rare delicacy or experiencing a powerful sensation. Matt felt a strange warmth spread through him, emanating from the point of contact, a faint echo of whatever she was feeling. It wasn't unpleasant, more like a sudden, unexpected connection, a spark jumping across an impossible divide. Ariana watched, bewildered. Matt, what's happening? Matt shook his head, equally confused but undeniably intrigued. I don't know. Xandria opened her eyes, her gaze locked onto Matt's. She spoke again, her voice softer now, the clicks and tones conveying a sense of urgency and question. She gestured towards his arm, then towards the paralyzed predator still lying frozen back in the previous chamber. She touched her own wrist, where faint lines indicated veins beneath her blue skin, then mimed the action of the dart striking the creature. She pointed back at Matt, then tapped her own chest, a look of profound confusion on her face. Matt struggled to decipher the meaning. Her venom, delivered by the dart, had paralyzed the predator instantly. But his blood, did it react differently? He remembered the warmth, the strange connection when she tasted it. Could it be that her venom, lethal or paralytic to the native life forms of Nexus 6, had a different effect on humans? Or perhaps, specifically, on him? He looked at the blood welling again on his cut. Turduranova subjected all its off-world personnel to a battery of genetic modifications and inoculations, designed to enhance resilience against alien pathogens and environments. Could one of those modifications have altered his blood chemistry in such a way that it interacted uniquely with Xandria's biology? With her venom, Xandria seemed to reach the same conclusion. She rose gracefully and retrieved one of the small darts from her thigh pouch. She held it up, showing it to Matt, then carefully touched the razor-sharp tip to the inner side of her own forearm. A single drop of clear, slightly viscous liquid welled up her venom. It shimmered faintly in the firelight. She looked at Matt, her golden eyes questioning, seeking permission. She wanted to test her hypothesis. She wanted to mix her venom with his blood directly. Fear warred with curiosity within Matt. Her venom paralyzed giant predators instantly. What would it do to him? Yet, the memory of that strange warmth, that fleeting connection, urged him to trust this enigmatic huntress who had saved their lives. He looked at Ariana, who gave a small, uncertain nod, taking a deep breath. Matt extended his arm, offering the small cut. With infinite care, Xandria touched the venom-coated tip of the dart to the bead of his blood. The reaction was immediate, but not violent. The moment the clear venom mingled with the red blood, a soft, ethereal blue light bloomed on the surface of Matt's skin, pulsing gently. It wasn't painful. Instead, an intense wave of euphoria washed over Matt, far stronger than the fleeting warmth he'd felt earlier. It felt like pure sunlight flooding his veins, chasing away the fear and exhaustion, replacing it with a profound sense of peace and connection. He gasped, his own eyes widening. He looked at Xandria and saw his own astonishment mirrored in her golden gaze. She too felt it. A resonant feedback loop established between them. The blue light intensified, illuminating their faces, casting dancing shadows on the cave walls. It felt intimate, powerful, a shared experience that transcended language and biology. Xandria let out a soft, melodic sigh, a sound of pure wonder. The light faded slowly, leaving behind a tingling warmth and a lingering sense of profound connection between them. She looked at Matt, truly looked at him, and for the first time, he saw not just a huntress or an alien, but a person, filled with awe and perhaps a touch of fear at the power they had accidentally unlocked. His blood didn't just neutralize her venom, it transformed it, creating a symbiotic reaction, a bond unlike anything either of them had ever known. She retracted the dart, her movements almost reverent. She understood now. He was different. His human biology, perhaps altered by Turturanova's meddling, made him immune to her venom's paralytic effects. Instead, it created this resonance, this shared euphoria. She looked at the remaining smear of his blood on her finger, then back at him, a silent question in her eyes. He understood. She wanted more, not out of malice, but out of fascination, out of a need to understand this impossible connection. Hesitantly, Matt nodded. From that moment, a strange symbiosis began. Xandria, driven by an insatiable curiosity about the human whose blood reacted so uniquely with her own essence, kept Matt and Ariana safe within the hidden sanctuary of her caves. She provided them with food, roasted alien tubers, strange fruits that tasted like terrestrial berries crossed with spice, and occasionally cooked meat from creatures Matt didn't recognize, and clean water. She learned their names, repeating Matt and Ariana with her melodic intonation until the sounds became familiar echoes in the stone chambers. Communication remained rudimentary, a slow process of gestures, pointing, and tentative vocalizations, but a fragile understanding began to form, and almost every cycle, as the twin suns painted the distant surface world in hues of orange and purple, Xandria would approach Matt. With utmost gentleness, she would use a sharpened obsidian shard to make a tiny nick on his finger or arm, just enough to draw a single drop of blood. She would taste it, her eyes closing in that now familiar expression of wonder and euphoria. The faint blue light pulsing briefly between them, reinforcing the inexplicable bond. Matt, surprisingly, found he didn't fear these moments. The initial apprehension had faded, replaced by the same fascination that drove Xandria. The shared euphoria was addictive, a momentary escape from their perilous reality. But it was more than that. It was a connection, a silent conversation that spoke volumes more than their fumbling attempts at verbal communication. He felt a growing trust in this alien huntress, a sense of safety in her presence despite her lethal capabilities. He saw the intelligence in her eyes, the careful consideration in her actions. She was not a mindless predator, she was a protector, a survivor, perhaps the last of her kind. Ariana, ever the scientist, observed their interactions with keen interest, meticulously documenting everything in her salvaged datapad, its battery carefully conserved. The Venom seems to act as a potent neurotoxin on Nexus 6 fauna, she theorized quietly to Matt one cycle, watching Xandria expertly skin a small, furry creature near the fire. Complete synaptic paralysis. But your blood chemistry, likely due to the gene mods and immunoboosters Turturanova pumped into us, seems to contain an enzyme or protein that denatures the toxin upon contact. More than denatures, it seems to catalyze a biophosphorescent reaction and triggers a massive endorphin release in both of you. It's unprecedented. As the days turned into weeks, blending into the timeless rhythm of the underground caverns, Matt and Ariana learned more about Xandria and her people, the Xithri, through gestures, rudimentary drawings scratched onto cave walls with charcoal, and Xandria's slowly expanding vocabulary of English words learned from them. A picture emerged. The Xithri were an ancient race, deeply connected to the planet, living in harmony with its dangerous ecosystem for millennia. They were not primitives. Their society was complex, built on tradition, ecological understanding, and a unique biological connection to the world around them. Xandria was not alone, but her clan was small, scattered, hiding. Her drawings depicted Xithri figures growing weaker, their vibrant blue skin fading, their numbers dwindling. She would point towards the surface, towards the direction of the Turturanova base, her expression hardening, a deep sadness entering her golden eyes. She would mimic coughing, weakness, her gestures painting a picture of slow poisoning. Ariana Cross referenced Xandria's gestures with the geological data she still had access to on her datapad. Turturanova's initial atmospheric processors and exploratory drilling operations, even in their preliminary stages, had released trace amounts of heavy metal particulates and synthetic chemical byproducts into the air and water table, harmless to humans in the short term, according to Turturanova's own doctored environmental reports, but potentially devastating to a native species with a completely different biology. especially one as finely tuned to Nexus 66 environment as the Zithri appeared to be. "My God, Matt," Ariana whispered, her face grim. "It's the mining operations. Turturanova isn't just planning to strip mine the planet. They're already poisoning it. They're committing xenocide, slowly, quietly, and they probably don't even care. Or maybe they even know." The realization hit Matt like a physical blow. The company he worked for, the reason he was here, was responsible for the decline of Xandria's people. The silence in the jungle, the desperation of the predators attacking the base. It wasn't just random alien aggression. It was likely a consequence of ecological disruption, a food chain collapsing under the weight of industrial toxins. Xandria seemed to sense their dawning horror. She led them deeper into the cave system, through passages Matt hadn't realized existed, until they reached a vast, hidden chamber. Unlike her living space, this cavern felt sacred. Intricate carvings covered the walls, depicting Zithri history, their connection to the planet, their reverence for life. In the center stood several stone plinths, upon which rested Zithri, who were unnervingly still. Their blue skin was dull, almost gray, their breathing shallow, their golden eyes clouded and vacant. They weren't dead, but they were fading, trapped in a state of profound lethargy, their life force slowly ebbing away. Xandria touched one of the figures, an elder female, judging by the intricate patterns on her skin, her expression filled with sorrow. She looked at Matt, then gestured towards the afflicted Zithri, then back towards his arm, where the tiny scars from her blood sampling remained. The implication was clear, staggering. Could his blood, the blood that neutralized her venom and created their unique bond, also hold the key to healing her people? Could the very genetic meddling intended to help humans exploit Nexus 6 be the Zithri's salvation? The hope, fragile yet fierce, ignited within Matt. Ariana, your datapad, your geological surveys, atmospheric analysis, cross-reference with the toxins Turturanova uses in their drilling lubricants and atmospheric processors. If we can identify the specific contaminants affecting the Zithri, Ariana was already working, her fingers flying across the holographic interface. "And your blood," she added, her eyes bright with scientific fervor. "We need a sample, a proper one. If I can isolate the enzyme or protein responsible for the reaction with Xandria's venom, analyze its structure, maybe, just maybe, we can synthesize an antidote, or at least a counteragent." Xandria watched them, understanding dawning in her eyes as she recognized the scientific equipment and the intensity of their focus. She readily offered a sample of her own venom, carefully collected in a small vial Ariana produced from her kit. Matt allowed Ariana to draw a larger sample of his blood, working by the dim light of the datapad and the glowing crystals. Using the rudimentary tools they had and salvaged components from their environment suits, Ariana began the painstaking process of analysis and synthesis. Xandria stood guard, her presence a silent promise of protection, while Matt assisted Ariana, his xenobiology background proving invaluable. Days blurred into a cycle of intense concentration, fueled by dwindling power packs, recycled water, and the desperate hope that flickered in the sacred chamber. Surrounded by the fading Zithri, progress was slow, fraught with setbacks. Ariana's equipment was field-grade, not designed for complex biochemical synthesis in a cave. Power was a constant concern. Yet, driven by the urgency of the situation and the palpable hope emanating from Xandria, they persisted. Matt found his connection with Xandria deepening during this time. Shared purpose forged a new level of intimacy. Silent glances exchanged across the makeshift lab. A shared meal by the fire. The nightly ritual of the blood tasting. Each interaction wove their lives closer together. He learned to read the subtle shifts in her golden eyes, the tension in her shoulders, the softening of her features when she looked at him. The euphoria of the blood bond was still present, but it was evolving, becoming less about the physical sensation and more about an emotional and mental resonance. He felt echoes of her thoughts, her anxieties for her people, her fierce protectiveness, her growing affection for him. It was terrifying and exhilarating. Meanwhile, on the surface, Turduranova was regrouping. The loss of the primary research base was a setback, but merely a temporary one for the corporate behemoth, Elliot Vance. The regional director known for his ruthless efficiency and utter lack of moral scruples, arrived in system aboard the heavily armed corporate cruiser Starfall. He surveyed the wreckage of the base via drone feeds, his expression cold and calculating. The official report would be catastrophic equipment malfunction and unforeseen aggressive fauna. But Vance wasn't buying it. The sensor logs, though fragmented, showed anomalies. The speed and coordination of the attack suggested more than just animalistic rage. And then there were the missing personnel, Riley, the xenobiologist, and Sharma, the geologist. Loose ends. Witnesses. Vance dispatched heavily armed risk mitigation teams, corporate mercenaries with state-of-the-art tracking equipment and orders to sterilize the situation, find the missing personnel, eliminate any surviving threats, native or otherwise, and secure the sector for immediate resumption of resource extraction. He also gave specific orders: capture any unusual native life forms, particularly intelligent ones. Turturanova's bioweapons division was always looking for new assets, and a creature capable of wiping out a reinforced base held potential. The hunt was on. Down in the caverns, Ariana finally had a breakthrough. "I think I've got it, Matt," she exclaimed, her voice hoarse with exhaustion but triumphant. She held up a synthesized vial containing a small amount of clear, faintly shimmering liquid. "Based on your blood's enzymatic reaction, this compound should theoretically bind to the specific Turturanova contaminants, primarily the heavy metal isotopes and the synthetic polymer residue, and render them inert within the Zithri metabolism. It might even reverse some of the cellular damage if administered soon enough." She looked at Xandria, then at the fading elders. "But it's untested. The dosage is theoretical, and we only have enough for maybe 3 or 4 individuals." Hope warred with caution, a potential antidote, but limited in quantity and uncertain in effect. Xandria understood the limitations through their simplified explanations and gestures. She pointed towards the most afflicted elder, the female she had touched before. Her decision was clear. They would try, with infinite care, using a primitive but effective syringe fashioned by Xandria from a hollow bone and a sharpened sliver of crystal. They administered the compound into the elder Zithri's arm. They waited. The silence in the sacred chamber stretching taut with anticipation. Minutes turned into an hour. Nothing seemed to change. Despair began to creep in. Had they failed? Then, a faint sigh escaped the elder's lips. Her fingers twitched. Color, a pale but definite blue, began to seep back into her grayish skin, starting around the injection site and slowly spreading. Her clouded eyes flickered, a spark of awareness returning. She blinked, her gaze slowly focusing on Xandria, who knelt beside her, tears shimmering in her golden eyes. A weak smile touched the elder's lips. She reached out a trembling hand, touching Xandria's face in a gesture of recognition and gratitude. It worked. The antidote worked. Relief washed over Matt and Ariana, so potent it left them weak-kneed. Xandria let out a choked cry of joy, embracing the elder gently. Hope, real and vibrant, flooded the sacred chamber. But their celebration was cut short. A distant, rhythmic thumping sound began to filter down from the surface, growing steadily louder. Boots, heavy, armored boots, and the unmistakable whine of advanced scanning equipment. Vance's risk mitigation teams were closing in. They had found the cavern entrances. "They're here," Matt breathed, grabbing his pulse rifle. Ariana quickly secured her datapad and the precious vial of antidote. Xandria rose, her joy replaced by fierce determination. She grabbed her spear, her eyes blazing with protective fire. She issued a series of rapid clicks and whistles, a call echoing through the tunnels. Within moments, shadows detached themselves from the walls, and 3 more Xithri warriors appeared, materializing as if from the rock itself. They were leaner than Xandria, their patterns different, but they carried the same lethal grace and grim resolve. They carried long blowpipes and quivers of the paralytic darts. Xandria exchanged swift, guttural commands with them. The plan was clear: protect the sacred chamber, protect the antidote, protect the survivors. Matt looked at Ariana. "Stay here with the elder. Keep working on synthesizing more antidote if you can. We need to buy you time." Ariana nodded, her face pale but set. "Be careful, Matt." He turned to Xandria, meeting her intense golden gaze. No words were needed. He saw the fear for her people, the resolve to fight, and something else directed solely at him. A fierce protectiveness, a reflection of the bond that pulsed between them. Stronger now than ever. He nodded, gripping his rifle. "Let's go." Xandria led the way, flanked by her warriors. Matt bringing up the rear, his human weapon incongruous but necessary against Turturanova's technology. They moved swiftly and silently through the familiar passages, heading back towards the main entrance cavern, where they had first encountered Xandria. The rhythmic thudding of boots grew louder, accompanied by harsh, filtered voices speaking in tactical jargon. "Sector clear." Thermal signatures detected ahead. Multiple biosigns, humanoid and other. Command: "We have confirmation of indigenous sentient life, and possibly the missing personnel. Orders remain: neutralize all hostiles. Secure the assets. Vance wants specimens, preferably live." Matt felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. Specimens. Vance intended to capture Xandria and her people, to study them, weaponize them, dissect them, over his dead body. They reached the large cavern just as the first Turturanova mercs rappelled down from a newly blasted hole in the ceiling, bathed in the harsh glare of portable floodlights. There were 6 of them, clad in heavy black armor, pulse rifles leveled, visors scanning the crystal-lit expanse. Targets acquired. Engage. Plasma bolts erupted, searing the air, impacting harmlessly against crystal formations as the Xithri melted into the shadows. Xandria signaled her warriors. From unseen crevices, darts flew with unerring accuracy. 2 mercs stumbled, their movements instantly freezing as the Xithri venom took hold, turning them into armored statues mid-stride. Contact. Paralysis agent deployed. Switch to sealed systems. The squad leader barked, his voice tinny over the external speakers. The remaining 4 mercs activated their environmental seals, their movements becoming slightly more cumbersome. Matt opened fire from behind a large crystal outcrop, his pulse bolts striking the leader's shoulder plate, sending sparks flying. "Riley, found him. Take him alive if possible." Vance wants a word. The mercs returned fire, plasma bolts exploding around Matt's cover, showering him with crystal shards. Xandria used the diversion, flowing like blue lightning across the cavern floor. She dodged a spray of plasma fire, her spear a blur as she closed the distance with one of the mercs. She feinted left, then spun, driving the obsidian tip into the vulnerable joint beneath the merc's armpit, bypassing the armor. The merc screamed, dropping his rifle, before Xandria silenced him with a swift blow to the helmet. Another Zithri warrior, perched high on a ledge, used his blowpipe, sending a dart into the neck seal of a fourth merc just as he turned to fire. The man choked, clawed at his throat, and collapsed, twitching before falling still. Only two mercs remained, back to back, firing wildly into the shadows. Matt risked exposing himself, laying down suppressing fire to keep their heads down. He saw Xandria preparing to charge again, but then a new sound echoed from the entrance tunnel, the heavy tread of something much larger, a mech, a Turterinova pacifier urban assault unit, heavily armed and armored, its optical sensors glowing red. It squeezed through the entrance, its heavy cannons swiveling. All hostile elements, cease resistance. You are trespassing on Turterinova corporate property. The situation turned desperate. Zithri darts and spears were useless against the mech's heavy plating. Matt's pulse rifle barely scratched its surface. The mech opened fire, its rotary cannons spitting explosive rounds that tore chunks out of the cavern walls, sending crystals flying like shrapnel. One of the Zithri warriors cried out as he was hit, falling from his perch. Xandria pulled him back into cover, her face grim. They were outgunned, trapped. The two remaining mercs advanced under the mech's covering fire. Matt knew they had only moments. He looked at Xandria, a desperate idea forming. The bond, the reaction between his blood and her venom. It created euphoria, light. But what if that energy could be focused, directed? He remembered the warmth, the power. He met Xandria's eyes, trying to convey his intent through the connection that pulsed between them. He touched the small scars on his arm, then gestured towards the mech, then back to her darts. She hesitated for only a fraction of a second, then seemed to understand. Her eyes widened slightly, a flicker of fear mixed with resolve. It was incredibly dangerous, unprecedented, but they had no other choice. She nodded curtly, while Matt laid down covering fire, drawing the mech's attention. Xandria moved with incredible speed. She retrieved one of the paralytic darts from a fallen warrior, then darted towards Matt's position behind the crystal outcrop. Plasma fire stitched the ground around her, but she moved like smoke, untouchable. She reached him, her golden eyes locking with his. No time for ceremony. She pricked her own wrist, coating the dart tip with her venom. Then, with unwavering focus, she drove the dart shallowly into Matt's forearm. The effect was instantaneous and overwhelming. Not euphoria this time, but raw power. Blinding blue light erupted from the injection site, engulfing Matt. He cried out, not in pain, but from the sheer influx of energy. It coursed through his veins, setting every nerve alight. He felt immensely strong, hyper-aware, connected to Xandria on a level that transcended thought. He could feel her determination, her fear, her strength pouring into him, mingling with his own altered human biology. The blue light coalesced around him, forming a shimmering aura. The mech paused its firing, its optical sensors trying to process the impossible energy reading. Warning: unidentified energy signature detected. Extreme power levels. Matt surged out from behind the cover, the pulse rifle feeling like a toy in his supercharged grip. He didn't fire it, instead, focusing the energy, channeling the symbiotic power coursing through him. He charged directly at the mech. The remaining mercs opened fire, but the plasma bolts seemed to dissipate harmlessly against the crackling blue aura surrounding him. He felt Xandria's presence with him, guiding him, strengthening him. He reached the mech in seconds, leaping upwards with augmented strength, landing on its chassis. He plunged his hand, crackling with blue energy, directly into the mech's primary optical sensor. Metal screamed and fused. Circuits overloaded. The mech staggered, its cannons firing wildly before it seized up, collapsing into silence, its red eye dark. Matt landed lightly on the cavern floor as the energy aura slowly faded, leaving him breathless and trembling, but unharmed. The two remaining mercs stared in disbelief, momentarily stunned. That was all the opening Xandria and the remaining Xithri warrior needed. Spears flashed, darts flew, and the last of the Turteranova mercs fell silent. Silence returned to the great cavern, broken only by the crackle of dying machinery and the pained gasps of the injured Xithri warrior. Matt leaned against the cool crystal wall, the residual energy humming beneath his skin. He looked at his arm where Xandria had injected him. The skin was whole, unmarked, but he could feel the lingering connection, the echo of her essence intertwined with his own. Xandria rushed to the side of her injured warrior, examining his wounds with practiced care. She then approached Matt, her golden eyes filled with awe, relief, and a deep, searching intensity. She reached out, her blue fingers gently tracing the spot on his arm where the dart had entered. Matt, she whispered, the name imbued with new meaning. He met her gaze, the depth of their connection undeniable. It wasn't just symbiosis anymore. It was something deeper, something profound. In that shared moment of desperate survival, facing death together, their bond had irrevocably shifted, solidifying into something sacred. They tended to the wounded warrior, stabilizing him as best they could. Ariana arrived moments later, having heard the cessation of gunfire, her face etched with worry. Seeing Matt and Xandria alive, the defeated mech, and the neutralized mercs, relief washed over her. What happened? She asked, surveying the scene. Matt briefly explained the desperate gamble, the unexpected surge of power. Ariana looked from Matt to Xandria, her scientific mind racing. A focused bioenergetic discharge, triggered by the Venom blood interaction under extreme duress. Fascinating and terrifying. Xandria, meanwhile, communicated with her remaining warrior, who nodded grimly before slipping back into the tunnels, likely to warn other hidden Xithri clans of the escalated threat. Xandria turned back to Matt and Ariana. Using gestures and the words she knew, she conveyed the urgency. More Turteranova forces would come. Vance wouldn't stop. They needed to escape the caves, find a way to expose Turteranova's actions, to save her people, not just from the immediate threat, but from the slow poisoning that afflicted them. Ariana checked her datapad. The merc's comm signals were cut off abruptly. Vance will know something went wrong. He'll likely initiate planetary bombardment protocols if his ground teams don't report back soon. We don't have much time. She indicated the datapad, but I intercepted their comm chatter before it went dead. They mentioned Vance is personally overseeing operations from the Starfall in orbit, and I managed to pull encrypted data logs from the mech's auxiliary memory core before it completely died. Financial records, internal memos, suppressed environmental reports. Matt, it's all here. Proof of Turteranova deliberately falsifying data, ignoring environmental protocols, covering up the effects on the Xithri. Everything we need to expose them. Hope surged anew. They had the cure, albeit limited. They had proof of Turteranova's crimes. But they were trapped underground on a hostile world with a ruthless corporation hunting them from orbit. Xandria looked at Matt, a silent question in her eyes. He knew what needed to be done. They had to get off Nexus 6. They had to reach Earth authorities. He looked at Ariana, then back at the fading Zithri elder in the sacred chamber, now breathing more easily thanks to the antidote. He thought of the other Zithri, hidden, suffering. He felt the lingering power of the bond with Xandria, a connection that now felt as essential as breathing. "Okay," Matt said, his voice firm. "Here's the plan." Their escape was a desperate race against time. Guided by Xandria, they navigated treacherous, unused tunnels that led towards the surface. Far from the compromised main entrances, Ariana worked frantically on her datapad, decrypting the Turturnova files and attempting to find a way to bypass orbital surveillance. Matt, still feeling the echoes of the energy surge, found his senses heightened, his strength subtly enhanced. He felt more attuned to the environment, to Xandria, the bond acting like a compass, a warning system. Xandria herself was a whirlwind of focused intensity, scouting ahead, disabling primitive Turturnova sensor drones left by earlier survey teams. Her knowledge of the planet's secret ways their greatest asset. They reached the surface under the eerie light of Nexus 66 twin moons, emerging into a mist-shrouded valley far from the ruins of the research base. The air was thick with the planet's unique scents, but also carried the faint, acrid taint of Turturnova's pollution. In the distance, the sky periodically lit up with the harsh glare of orbital scans from the starfall. Ariana finally broke through. "I've got it." An old emergency frequency, heavily encrypted, used by the Independent Stellar Inspectorate. "It's a long shot, but if we can transmit the data logs." They needed a powerful transmitter. Their personal comms were useless against Turturnova's jamming. Xandria seemed to understand their need. She led them towards a towering rock spire that dominated the valley, its peak shrouded in clouds. Using handholds Matt could barely see, she began to climb with astonishing agility. Matt and Ariana followed, the ascent perilous, the wind whistling around them. Near the summit, hidden within a weathered crevice, was an ancient Zithri artifact, a crystalline structure that hummed with latent energy. Xandria indicated it, then pointed towards Ariana's datapad. It was some kind of natural energy amplifier or focusing device, part of the Zithri's forgotten technology, deeply connected to the planet's energy field. Ariana quickly interfaced her datapad, rerouting power, configuring the transmission protocols. It's working. The crystal is amplifying the signal exponentially. Sending the data burst now. Let's hope someone is listening. The crystal pulsed with light as the massive data package, Turturnova's crimes laid bare, streamed out into the void, aimed at the faint hope of impartial justice light years away. As the last data packet transmitted, the sky above erupted, not with orbital scans, but with the fiery trails of drop pods descending from the starfall. Vance knew they were transmitting. He was sending everything he had. "They're coming," Matt yelled, pulling Ariana back from the ledge. Drop pods slammed into the valley floor below, disgorging heavily armed mercs and combat drones. Plasma fire began stitching patterns up the rock spire. Xandria met Matt's eyes, a fierce resolve burning within them. This was the final stand. She let out a sharp, piercing cry, a Zithri war call that echoed through the valley, answered by similar calls from the surrounding mists as hidden Zithri warriors emerged, armed with spears and blowpipes, ready to defend their world. The battle for Nexus 6 began on the slopes of the ancient spire. Matt fought alongside Xandria, the bond between them a tangible force. He felt her movements, anticipated her strikes, covered her flanks. The residual energy from their earlier merging still lingered, granting him speed and strength he hadn't possessed before. He used his rifle tactically, disabling drones, pinning down mercs, while Xandria and her warriors flowed through the chaos, their paralytic darts finding gaps in armor. their spears striking with lethal precision. But Turturanova's numbers and firepower were overwhelming. The Xithri fell, silent and stoic in their defense. Ariana, sheltered in the crevice, desperately tried to establish a stable comm link, broadcasting their location and the evidence on all frequencies. Suddenly, a larger vessel detached from the Starfall, Vance's personal shuttle, descending towards the spire. He wanted to oversee the capture himself. The shuttle landed near the base of the spire, and Elliot Vance emerged, flanked by elite guards in gleaming chrome armor. He surveyed the battle, his face impassive. Secure the female specimen and the human Riley. Terminate the rest, and retrieve that datapad. Xandria saw Vance, saw the architect of her people's suffering. A low growl emanated from her throat. She looked at Matt, a silent communication passing between them. They knew Vance was the key. Matt nodded grimly. They charged down the slope together, weaving through plasma fire, a blue and khaki blur against the rock. Vance watched their approach, a cruel smile touching his lips. Predictable. He raised a heavy energy weapon. Before he could fire, Xandria acted, not with her spear, but with a dart. She didn't aim to paralyze Vance, but to distract. The dart struck his weapon, causing it to discharge harmlessly. In that instant, Matt tackled Vance, sending them both tumbling down the rocky incline. They landed heavily near the shuttle ramp. Vance, enraged, drew a sidearm, but Matt, empowered by the bond's lingering effects, disarmed him with surprising ease. "It's over, Vance," Matt panted, holding the corporate executive down. "We sent the data. Everyone will know what Turturanova did here." Vance laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You think it matters. A few bleeding hearts on Earth. Turturanova owns the courts, the media. This will be buried. Nexus 6 will be ours." Just as Vance spoke, a brilliant light flashed in orbit. Not from the Starfall, but from a new arrival, a sleek, silver cruiser bearing the insignia of the Independent Stellar Inspectorate. Ariana's desperate broadcast had been heard. Turturanova vessel Starfall. A calm, authoritative voice boomed across all channels, overriding Vance's comms. "You are ordered to stand down your forces immediately. We have received evidence of gross violations of the Galactic Compact, including unsanctioned xenocide. Prepare to be boarded." Vance's face went slack with shock and disbelief. His mercenaries hesitated, looking towards their leader, then towards the imposing Inspectorate cruiser, now positioning itself menacingly above the Starfall. Seeing their advantage, Xandria and the remaining Xithri pressed their attack, quickly overwhelming the demoralized mercs. Inspectorate shuttles began descending, deploying heavily armed peacekeepers who swiftly secured the area, taking Vance and his surviving forces into custody. Matt helped Vance to his feet, handing him over to the Inspectorate soldiers. The fight was over. Matt found Xandria standing near the edge of the spire, looking out over the mist-filled valley as the twin suns began to rise, painting the sky in brilliant colors. The air seemed cleaner already, the oppressive weight of Turturanova lifting. He stood beside her, the silence comfortable, the bond between them a steady, warm pulse. She turned to him, her golden eyes softer than he'd ever seen them. She reached out, gently touching the side of his face, her blue fingers cool against his skin. "Matt," she said again, the word now holding universes of shared experience, danger, and affection. He covered her hand with his own. "Xandria." No other words were needed. The aftermath was swift and decisive. The evidence provided by Ariana, corroborated by Inspectorate investigators, and the testimony of Matt, and surprisingly cooperative elements within Turturanova itself, who feared implication, led to the corporation's downfall. Vance and his key associates faced trial for crimes against sentient species. Nexus 6 was declared a protected world under inspectorate jurisdiction. All resource extraction permanently halted. Relief efforts began, focused on environmental cleanup and providing aid to the surviving Xithri. Ariana, using her synthesized antidote and working alongside inspectorate scientists with proper labs, was able to mass-produce the cure. Slowly, painstakingly, the Xithri began to recover. The fading elders regained their strength, their blue skin vibrant once more. Clans emerged from hiding. Their numbers small, but their spirit unbroken. Matt chose to stay on Nexus 6. He couldn't imagine leaving, not after everything. He became the official liaison between the inspectorate, the scientific community studying Nexus 6 responsibly, and the Xithri people. His unique bond with Xandria made him the perfect bridge between two worlds. He learned the Xithri language, their customs, their deep connection to the living planet. Xandria remained by his side, a leader among her recovering people, her wisdom and strength guiding them towards renewal. The bond between them continued to deepen, evolving beyond shared euphoria or battle synergy into a profound love. A merging of souls that the Xithri called Kalar, a sacred union rarely seen. They worked together, Matt sharing human knowledge that could help the Xithri adapt without compromising their traditions, and Xandria sharing the ancient wisdom of her people, teaching humans how to listen to the planet, how to heal the wounds inflicted by Turturanova. Nexus 6, once scarred and poisoned, began to breathe again. New life flourished in the jungles, the silence replaced by the vibrant chorus of a recovering ecosystem. Statues were never erected, for the Xithri did not commemorate individuals in stone, but the story of the human whose blood defied venom and the huntress who chose connection over killing became a central part of their revitalized oral tradition. It was a story of improbable hope, of finding salvation in the most unexpected places, a testament to the fact that even across the vast gulfs between species, understanding and love could bloom, healing not just individuals, but entire worlds. Matt looked at Xandria, her golden eyes reflecting the light of the twin suns, her hand resting in his. The pulse of their bond, a quiet promise of a shared future, a happy ending forged in fire and venom, built on trust and sustained by love. The universe was vast and often dangerous, but here, on this recovering world, two souls from different stars had found their home, together,